Welcome everybody. My name is Stephanie Rosine and I'm an associate professor of art here at Hartwick College, where this is our virtual Hartwick Zoom room. And I teach ceramics. And so I'm really pleased to welcome tonight Gerald Brown and Mike Tavares, who are the co-founders of Clay Siblings. This lecture is a part of our 6-part series focusing on diverse perspectives this semester at Hartwick. We have one more lecture next Wednesday with artist Christina Hunt Wood. And so these are all open to the public. So those of you who are not Hartwick community members, you can look out in our Instagram profile for that information on that lecture. I am really pleased to introduce Mike and Gerald. Mike grew up in Rhode Island. He's a parent or child of parents who were proudly from the Cape Verde Islands. He was raised in the United States, but despite that, Mike's parents ensured that he understood about their culture, their language, traditional cuisine, which have been important pieces about making Mike who he is. Mike received his BFA from Syracuse University in New York, where he studied under Peter Biesecker and Errol Willett. And during his studies there, he discovered a love for earthenware and wood-fired ceramics. He is now at home in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and is one of the co-founders and co-leaders of the Clay Siblings, a nonprofit that aims to make clay and corresponding opportunities more accessible to high school students and other young artists of all backgrounds and identities. So welcome, Mike. Gerald Brown is a Chicago South Side native. She's currently based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. She too received her BFA from Syracuse University, emphasizing in sculpture and ceramics. She's researched in Paris, as well as furthered her studies at Penland School of Crafts and Haystack Mountain School of Crafts. In Philly, Gerald is a current member of the art collective Vox Populi, curating shows and special programming. In addition, she is a teaching assistant or artist assistant at the Clay Studios Clay Mobile Outreach Program, and more recently, one of the board of directors at Watershed Center for Ceramic Arts. And in addition to being a co-founder of the Clay Sibling Project. She is also recently joined the board of NCECA as coordinating social media, correct?
Yes, I'm
yes. And so NCECA is the National Council for the Education of Ceramic Arts, which is the organization in our field in ceramics that supports the field. So without further ado, we welcome you. We're really excited to have you here. And with that, I will turn it over to Gerald and Mike.
It's such a pleasure to meet you guys. We're so excited to talk about not only our beautiful friendship, but our project that we started while we were in undergrad. So I will share my screen. Perfect. Can everybody see it? Okay, perfect. All right. So again, hello everyone. My name is Gerald Brown from the South Side of Chicago, currently residing in Philadelphia.
My name is Mike Tavares from Pawtucket and currently living in Pawtucket, Rhode Island.
And we are the Clay Siblings.
So we wanted to give you like a decent picture. Most of our pictures are of us like when we're in the studio working and we're like weathered and tired and we look awful. This picture's from a trip that Gerald came down to come see me, and right before she hopped on the train back home, we took a quick snapshot and we thought we both looked good and shared that.
So, you know, before we jump into things, we're gonna just wanted to give you guys a quick glimpse of like what Clay Siblings Project is. We overall, our mission is just to put clay in front of kids and to show them that anything is possible and that everyone can have the capacity to be an artist. So we are two just passionate students who started at Syracuse and now are moving forward to work on this project. In high school, my primary background was in photography. So a lot of my understanding of art and installation started from really creating these immersive installations. I mean, getting all dressed up in different costumes and ideas to conceptually curate and these deep concepts that I now still work on today. I feel like before I even knew it, you know, I was really interested in sculpture just because of the way immersive environments really can bring the audience in and kind of like share different intimate moments. So this led to me being able in my final year starting sculpture where I like was working with my hands and understanding materiality. In Chicago, they allow students to take an advanced arts program downtown where you can like take any class you wanted. And I chose AP sculpture. So here we have like some of my first workings in the material and my first opportunity to really work with clay. I made my first bust and I was really interested in creating these abstract carvings. So I started to see and take note how much this material really responded to my body. Like I used to talk about how my hands knew what to do before my mind did. And that's really a defining moment for me because later on in college, I would gravitate back to material and really find myself diving headfirst into it like this. In addition to like my high school experience, there was a art center a couple blocks away from the school, and my friends and I, we would sometimes come there and just like literally hang out in the lobby and just to pass time. Sometimes we would be so loud. They were like, "Do you guys want to make art?" And that's when they kind of started these teen art programs. It was such a huge impact on me because the organization really tried to prioritize saying yes rather than saying no. And if they couldn't say yes, what did maybe look like? And that was so influential because it showed me what it looked like to prioritize the student's voice, prioritize getting resources to help them achieve what they needed. And without, kind of coming in contact with this organization, I wouldn't know, or I wouldn't have that intimate glimpse of what it means to like really dig down and provide opportunities that can really change a student's life.
And so my artistic journey started with my transition from Shea High School to JMW, School for the Visual and Performing Arts. I attended Shea High School, as a public high school that I was assigned to due to my district. And while I was there, I had a friend who encouraged me to continue to draw. And he was applying to JMW. And so he thought it was a good idea if I tagged along. And thankfully I did. I started making work every day. And that was something that was kind of new to me. And the first thing that I wanted to do was the bust. Right away, it was my first time touching clay. And it was an exciting moment because I had a professor there a teacher there who, before he was teaching, he was full-time an artist, and he was making molds for industries and other artists. So being immersed in a space where there are other makers in the space making constantly, and there's a teacher that encourages.
Have we lost Mike's sound?
I can't hear him.
Okay. Hey, Mike, we've lost your sound for some reason.
Okay, there it is.
Can you hear me again?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Go right ahead.
Yeah.
Where was I? No.
You talk about how you were throwing down in the studio at a young age, man.
Right. So,
making art every day.
Yeah.
Hustling.
So I got to work with different materials, and it was just, new to me. And I would eventually go back to working with clay again. For my last project in my portfolio was this bust that I did of my sister.
We lost you again, Mike.
All the joys of Zoom.
I know. We tested this like 15 times,
Everything's frozen. I can't.
Hang on. Maybe Mike should log off and log back on. Sometimes that's successful. I'm gonna type it in the chat. I don't know if you can see this, but
Okay. I hear you.
Like,
Yeah. Can you hear me though? Okay.
Right now.
Yeah. Just try it real quick, and then maybe the rest of the presentation would be cool.
Wait, what'd you say?
Log back out and log back in. Maybe that will help make sure the rest of the presentation is smooth. All right. Thank you, everybody. We love y'all.
These are the struggle and the joy of the Zoom room.
Yes. We were like practicing so much to make sure we minimize all tech difficulties. But we knew once we got on stage,
it's all good.
Everything was apt to be shaken up. brother.
Oh, Simon's saying Mike is hitting the space bar. That's what's muting him.
Oh.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, and
yeah, Mike, did you hear that? Simon said you might be hitting the space bar, which does temporarily mute you. So like this,
Oh,
like
okay.
if you
Maybe
talk like
I didn't feel like I did,
that.
but all right. So, all right.
You was whipping it up in the studio, making a bus of your sister, bro.
Yeah, so Mara O'Day was there as an advisor, and she was specifically there for the seniors to help figure out what kind of direction we wanted to go in. And my top priority was that I was able to afford going to school. And so when we developed this list, Syracuse was in there because they usually have fairly good financial aid. And I'd apply with my portfolio and surprisingly got in.
So when we got to Syracuse, there was, when you first enter like many schools, you can test out a bunch of different disciplines. But both Mike and I found ourselves in the ceramics studio the most often. Mike would be in there first and then I would find it later. But no matter what classes we were taking, we always found ourselves looking to each other for support. You know, sometimes you're high, sometimes you're low, sometimes you're on, sometimes you're off. And usually whenever one of us is moving, the other one is stuck. And that really helped us cultivate a bond of just learning from each other's success and learning from each other's weaknesses.
Yeah, we were both trying to just figure out this new material. And so anytime I discover something new or find something new coming out of the kiln, I'd kind of report it to Gerald and vice versa. And so it was just this constant like learning, and like it just kept stacking and stacking. And that's just how we developed a friendship at first.
Yeah, as much as like, you know, we were trying to improve on like techniques and things like that, we found that, you know, we could go to our professors and ask them questions, but a lot of the growth came from just depending and learning from each other's strengths. But but as much as we tried to work hard, we tried to play hard. So here's a couple of shots of us just having a good time, you know, either on the left, like us and Sika, eating great food and just enjoying ourselves, or being in the studio working really hard, but we got to cook. So, you know, you make sure we get the nutrition, or, you know, finishing a crit really strong after, you know, a large body of work that we've been really trying to tighten up and display for the department. So I think overall, as much as, you know, we like to say like the studio shaped us to be like disciplined workers, it also brought us together to have like lots and lots of fun.
Yeah, that picture in the middle is of when we knew that we were going to get snowed in. And so it was either we get snowed in the studio and we work and we don't eat, or we get snowed in at home and sleep. And so I decided to bring in some food and we chefed it up, watched some comedies, and then got right back to work.
Yeah, we even used a little kettle to boil some noodles for some mac and cheese. We really were like trying to live the rich, very studio hustle rat life. But through it all, like these two components of like working really hard and having a lot of fun made us siblings. And as much as we like learned from each other, we also looked to the grad students who were in the department to really, you know, teach us some things that they were exploring as well. And as I was getting close to Daniel Ruggiero, who was our education and ceramics grad dual, she really taught me a lot about, you know, different ideas that she was exploring, you know, advanced pedagogy and things of that nature. But also like she just was somebody that I looked up to who made me feel really good about some of the choices I was making.
Simultaneously, I'd get really close to Pete Smith. Pete Smith is one of the people who kind of introduced me into the studio and kind of taught me a lot of the basics that I know today. He taught me how to wood fire. He taught me a lot of tricks on mold making. And so I developed a relationship with him. And what made it so special is that, of course, we have the professors that, you know, we have our own time with and then we can ask questions, and they were great as well. But Pete was a constant in the studio. And so at any point, you know, time of the night, I can kind of poke my head into the studio and he can kind of walk me through something whenever he did have time to.
Yeah, so as we built these relationships with these two older siblings who kind of had a constant back and forth between them, we inherited that sibling relationship as well as the love for wood firing.
And so to further explain what wood firing is, it's a large kiln that's fueled by wood. And there's a firebox, which is up front. You can see in the top middle there. And then, you stack your pots in between the chimney and the firebox. And the flame travels through the kiln and creates patterns on the pots. And this sort of was like a first tester for our basic friendship and understanding each other's space and
Ooh,
work rate.
ooh.
There's a lot of preparation that goes into wood firing. You have to obviously make the pots, bisque them. You have to stack them into the kiln, and you can't cheat this process. You have to kind of follow through on every aspect, or you get cheated in the product in the end. And so you're in front of this firebox that's like over 2,000 degrees, and you're kind of switching shifts and coming back and forth and kind of relying on each other to get this kiln up to the temperature.
For sure. It was like a huge turning point for us because, a lot of stuff in the studio where we would like laugh and joke and have individual conversations. When we fired together for the first time, we really had to lean on the strength of each other and knowing when to like push each other, but when to pull back. And that became such a huge turning point in how the relationship continued to develop, but also the way we understand a project that we will start later on. But
So
overall,
go ahead, go ahead.
overall, like it was a lot of fun, and we can see from these three different pods, just like the mark making that the flame can create, just like with this curvy like line on the pot on the left, or even seeing the change in coloration through the carvings with the bottle on the right.
So wood firing would kind of become a metaphor for the way that we run the project. There's a great amount of preparation that leads up to the point that we actually go into these schools. And when we go into these schools, it's high energy all the time. Students are just kind of flying back and forth. And we kind of understood each other's temperament in the way, how much space that we each needed based on the way that we would fire in the wood kiln.
Exactly. And building off of our experiences in high school with, exploring new materials like clay and drawing for the first time, having access to like different ways people were trying to give us opportunities in the field, to even like the intimate moments we had building our own relationships. The project became an intersecting point for all that to come together. It became a moment for us to like not only take our relationship and friendship to the next level, but really take this nuanced idea that we learned from Pete and Danielle about what it means to be a sibling and what it means to build these relationships with somebody who's younger than you and pass down like little tips and tricks about what you learned to make it easier on them. So when they move through the process, they can do a little bit more than that.
So that became sort of like the center of everything, of our individual experiences, but also our relationship with our older siblings, Pete and Danielle, and with each other.
So in Portland, when we first launched the project in 2017, our primary goal, oh wait, back up. So essentially Clay Siblings is we do free ceramic workshops during the week of NCECA. So we go there the Monday and Tuesday in the city that the conference is hosted in and provide free workshops with different high school students. In Portland, the emphasis was just trying to get in front of students and show them that there were college students out there who were making in ceramics, who were majoring in it, going to conferences, getting all these different opportunities, and just showing them that like it could be anybody, no matter what your background is, no matter where you come from, family structure, it can literally be anybody. And so we picked two local high schools that were in the area. They had ceramic programs, and it was just about having fun. We showed them some of the new techniques that we were trying in our practice, as well as just like telling them about our experience at Syracuse.
Right. And with each year that we do it, we kind of pick up on new things that we introduce into the next year. And so something that we noticed that while we're important, we were talking a lot about NCECA and telling these kids how it's in the backyard, but we didn't take any of the kids there. So in Pittsburgh,
They
we
like,
took
what's NCECA?
and so in Pittsburgh, we took it a step further, and we selected a few kids to take to the conference. We also introduced the idea of having other BFA candidates um, follow along with us. And so we were recruiting people that were within the region to come into the schools with us.
Yeah, we in Portland, we were only able to hit 2 schools because it was just Mike and I. But we were like, everyone deserves to have an opportunity to have access to this. What if we were able to recruit more people? So then by, picking schools in the area, we were able to hit 3 schools instead of 2.
And then in Minneapolis, we reached out to schools that did not have clay and did not have a clay program. And so we had to bring in wheels, we had to bring in extra clay, and we ended up bringing an entire classroom to the NCCA conference and partnering with Mark Shapiro and Sam Taylor, who are running the Make in Space, which is a space at the NCCA conference that where people can make things. And so we had a whole day dedicated to the high school students to come in and make things with other artists.
It was so much fun. I remember one student, he just learned how to throw a couple of days before when we arrived there, and he was so excited. He signed up for a competition to be the best thrower in the room, and that's the kind of confidence we want to be able to provide with the project. Just like kids being able to go at challenges fearlessly. And sometimes we would get different questions posed to us, like, is it unfair to introduce this idea or introduce this new material to students and then not be able to have, the school not being able to follow up with it? And I think what we learned in Minneapolis was it's not about either or, it's about what kind of complex questions we can ask to help challenge the barriers that the students will come across. So if the school doesn't have clay and we bring these materials to them, what else can we provide once we leave for them to continue to move forward? Because it's not just like a magic show where we come up and we have these wheels and it's like, oh, hey, this is a fun idea. We really want them to believe and understand that this is a reality.
And so here are some action shots of us actually in the schools. And what's funny is with each school, it's kind of like the same pattern when you go in and they're kind of like on their back foot and they're not sure about where these strangers coming in and touching this messy stuff. But once you get the first kid to make a bowl, everyone just kind of jumps in line and the energy just kind of shoots up and everyone is just super involved and the teacher's excited because it's the most that they've ever been excited about anything. And sometimes you even get teachers from other classes coming in and wanting to throw along with us.
One of the craziest experiences we've had running this project was in Pittsburgh, actually, a school, Westinghouse. A teacher had a ceramic program. He was just barely getting by. He had reclaimed clay that he was getting from other friends or other universities that they were kind of throwing out. And, when we contacted him, he was so excited that there were people out there looking at, his school and wanting to offer new resources that he on a Saturday, he cleaned up the back room and transformed it where all this kind of junk and clutter was. And when we got there, it was the first time that the students, as well as ourselves, were seeing this room full of wheels. And because he didn't really have a background in throwing, this was the first time the kids were actually learning how to throw. So we love being able to, whatever school we're at, excite any new energy, transform the place to look different than what it usually is, which helps them be able to explore new possibilities that they wouldn't have had the opportunity to have been presented.
Right. And it's 2 days of making. And so, we never get to bisque the pieces while we are there. If the schools do have kilns and they bisque them, but we also bring in donation pots and we wrap them off to the students so that they can see, this very real thing that was made by hands.
And this project could not be possible or grow to the size that it is without these lovely cohorts of siblings that we've come across. Each year we recruit students from BFA universities, either juniors or seniors, who just give their all. They really, we ask for them to just be passionate, to be excited, and be open to any unexpected changes, because there's a lot of flux that goes into the project from the moment we touch down in the city to the last workshop. And we couldn't ask for a better group of siblings to work with. We also really love the fact that, and each time we've done it, we've gotten more, a wider range of siblings from backgrounds to making practices to locations, ideas. And that just helps really hone in on the idea that we want to show the students that anybody can be an artist.
And originally, the idea was to recruit people that were within the region so that if they had a possibility to go back to these schools, they could. And we thought of recruiting BFA students to enrich, the experience for the students, but it also ended up enriching their lives as well. And they found it very exciting to go in these schools and have that experience to work with other students and be a part of something pretty much. It's also an opportunity for them to teach for the first time for some of them, and they go on to teach at other community centers or other schools. And so we're always really excited about seeing them again down the line, and then they're always kind of asking if there's going to be another Clay siblings and how they can be involved and how they can help.
It's really cool to see where the siblings go off to do. Like some, of course, get really cool opportunities for residencies, but a lot of them also just really build on the teaching experience, becoming like instructors at community centers or teachers at K through 12 programs. So it's really cool to see how the family grows and what they get into next. Look at that stylish dude on the left, man.
So this project is not possible without our wonderful community and supporters who help push the initiative forward. On the left there, that's me on top of several hundred pounds of clay that's donated from Continental, whether it's we partner with Continental or Standard Clay. They donate clay to us, and that's how we bring those into the schools. Or in Sika giving us passes so that we can bring kids to the conference. You can see that on the left. On the bottom, that's Pittsburgh, and up top, that was Minneapolis.
The coolest thing that we didn't expect, one of the visits, the earlier visits in Pittsburgh, students were like, either one, they were like, oh my gosh, is that a kiln? And it's just like, lights up the room. But then also one of them were like, so you're telling me in this entire conference space, there's no clay? And that's just such a odd thing to think about when it comes to NC, because we're so used to the demos and the presentations and the different exhibitions. But it was really cool when we were able to partner with Mark Shapiro and Sam Taylor, because the students just had so much fun just existing around other artists, other makers, and just like having a great time.
So you got to see how this friendship and this organization kind of came together. But we wanted to come up with a way of explaining it to people without going through the whole thing. And so we broke it down to the equation right here.
So when we think about the first leg of the project in Portland, just introducing a new skill and transforming the natural environment of the classroom that the students occupy. So this includes bringing in wheels, teaching them throwing, donation clay, slips, all those different things. It's really about showing them that they're capable of doing something of this magnitude and that it's fresh and new skill that they can build on.
And then why was the accessibility to art as a career. And so it's kind of giving them this worldview of how art can, be in their lives every day. When we were in Portland, we were in the classes showing them how to throw. And then in Pittsburgh, we introduced them to NCECA. And so that's kind of attaching this material and this making process to the rest of the world, like examples like museums or NCECA or galleries, exhibitions, workshops, residencies. It's just so that they can see the connection with the rest of the world.
Exactly. What we found that was limiting with only offering X, students really just get to understand the capacity of the world that they can control, right? Like their environment, their classrooms, their hands, which is really empowering, because if you never really felt the lightning or the passion that comes from just making an object, that's so inspiring. But then on the flip side, if you only go to museums or other galleries and don't have that connection to making, then you only see that this is a world that's unattainable for you. So when we were able to offer both of them together, it made a parallel connection between the fact that these are your hands and these are the things you can make, as well as this is the world that you have access to.
And so then comes Z, and Z is resources that keep the opportunities growing and overcoming those barriers. And so these, these are like scholarships, these are workshops, craft schools. We talk about the cons when we leave Pittsburgh. When we left Pittsburgh and we're dropping off the kids at their houses, one of the kids turned around and looked at me and said, "Am I ever going to see you again?" And it kind of just broke my heart to think that I entered a space, introduced this incredible experience, and then I'm just going to walk away from them and they potentially never see it again or see it again at some point down the line. And so how can we ask better questions so that we can continue to give opportunities for them to keep making their class, but also seeing the world attachment to the art form?
Exactly.
So we developed like a little visual here. If X is half of the circle, Y is the other half. And that's a two-dimensional shape, and then it stops at some point. It doesn't continue. And so Z is the continuation of that.
So we're thinking that if a student is able to experience making, have the outside world, Z is the propeller that keeps X's, popping up, keeps more opportunities for Y to pop up, keeps more opportunities for them to explore and make in a way that becomes infinite.
And so like this image here, if the sun is a student, then the opportunities in the making follow them in the spiraling motion, and it just continues to drive them forward. And so something that we also like doing is thinking about operating outside of NCECA. And you can see me on the right here. I went to Abacus Elementary School, located in Attleboro, Massachusetts, and did a day workshop with kids and brought in air dry clay and just had a whole bunch of fun making animals and houses with kids. And they were nice enough to send me a little care package.
I think as we move forward, the most important thing for us with the project is being able to continue to push ourselves, see how we can learn from, the mistakes and opportunities that we provided at other past cities, and being able to grow those networks with anybody that we come in contact with. I think also like it's really easy for this beautiful like passion project to want to just get up and run. So we've really tried to maintain different systems that help us not only continue to dream big, but also make sure we're not taking on anything that feels like that we can't manage. I think more than anything, Mike and I's friendship is the most important thing. And second is like the kids having the utmost experience. So if we aren't having a good time doing it, then that's going to directly impact the kids having a great time seeing us there. And overall, it's just about spreading good energy and spreading love. I think as we continue to be more creative and meet more people, the project is only going to keep growing.
And similar to the firing the wood kiln, you can't cheat the process. You just, you got to go all the way in. You got to make sure that you do it justice.
True. So we want to share a little bit about our own personal practice, what we're doing now since we've left undergrad, and how we're just kind of keeping the boat of making flowing.
So these are some pieces from my BFA show. On the right there, that's actually a wood fire piece with a forest green glaze on the side and some bowls with some ash glazes.
Mike, what did you eat out of those bowls in the top left? I mean, the top right.
So earlier, Stephanie mentioned in the bio about me understanding the cuisine of my Cape Verdean background. And so those bowls were just specifically made for this stew called cachupa, which is like, it has corns, beans, pork. It's sort of like, collard greens. It's sort of this thick soup that's kind of the traditional sort of Cape Verdean cuisine, like it's known for being their kind of iconic.
I can't tell I'm the annoying little sister.
And these are some pieces that I'm working on of recent. I have access to an electric kiln, so I've been working in low fire, and there are some coffee pots and some small cups that I've been working on. And I ended up sending to a gallery actually. And then
what gallery was that?
Northern Clay Center. I ended up sending some work over at Northern Clay Center. As you can see, she is that sister. and some other pieces that I've kind of got going. That familiar looking little bowl there, the jar, and that odd you are looking thing came from experimenting with trying to cut out the idea of functionality. Although the piece references functionality, I wasn't so interested in making a piece that would function, and it kind of led me down this funky road of slab work, which is pretty fun, and I'm still kind of having fun in.
So as I've grown in my own practice and leaving, immediately after I graduated from college, I took a position down at the clay studio where I was the gallery assistant, installing shows, solo work in the shop, really building relationships with artists. One of the coolest things that I loved about that job was I got a chance to curate my own show called Funkadelic Awakening, Imagining a Futuristic Resistance. And so it was a really cool opportunity to take all my experience as a sculptor, but also just someone who's in love with space and installation, and really transforming an environment to reflect a very cool concept that I thought about with artists reimagining their futures through like organic conceptual ideas. And so I love being able to test those ideas with curating. I've also started to a new position with Nsika as their social media curator. So continuously building on these ideas of accessibility, working with different kinds of artists, even exploring what does it mean to merge those ideas together with the conference coming up every year. So I'm really, really excited about some of these outside little buckets I get to have my hand in. But I also, similar to Mike, started my studio in my basement. When I was a senior at Syracuse, my thesis project was kind of revolving around this idea of descendants of strange fruit. And I would make these interesting, complex pinch forms out of red clay. Here are some of the variations that I've started to try since graduating. As I mentioned before, I'm very much into installation. Here's like some shots from my thesis show. Not only do I love just making the objects themselves, but really trying to turn my gears about what is the context that these objects live in? What is the things that the audience is going to come in contact with that enhances or contradicts what they're seeing in the object? I also like love just writing in my sketchbook. Like, I mean, I do a little bit of drawing, but I write a lot of notes, do a lot of like diagrams, copy excerpts from books that I'm reading. And it's this way to push against the object making that I have with ceramics. Typically, as of recently, I've been able to transform some of those writings in my sketchbook into permanent objects, like the sign on the left, or this interactive transparency diagram on the right, where I'm having all these intimate, kind of crazy conversations, and an audience member can come up and lift it and see the image underneath, as well as like the different organic kind of chitter chatter that's across the transparency.
So the core of this, project is our friendship, and some core rules that we kind of established when we came back from our first trip was that, one, we keep doing it as long as it's fun, as long as we're doing it together, because we wouldn't want to do it with anybody else. And our friendship and the kids' experiences are paramount. And yeah.
I think, overall, when Mike and I first met, we really wanted to just be better people. We like asked each other very hard questions. I mean, we laughed a lot. We love comedy, skits and sketches. But overall, that's translated to us wanting to be better, to produce something better for the world, to really create something that's bigger than ourselves. And as much as we have grown individually, the project has been able to build on that continuous imagination because of the strength of who we are individually. So as much as we want the project to be a success, we try to pour into who we are individually. So, reciprocally, the project can grow as well. But here's a small clip. It's not an actual video, but we'll send it to Stephanie. We typically try to do a video together every year, with just us not living in the same city. Like when we were in college, we try to do some designated time to not only have fun, but, plan the project in person. But we did a video that's really hilarious that starts off like explaining the project as well as just captures what our personality is. So we'll definitely forward that to Leah and Stephanie to show you guys. But here's our contact information. Definitely feel free to reach out to us. Like, we're gonna do a Q&A session, so you can access anything, but if you want to, we are always open ears, and you can follow us on Instagram as well as our
Shameless
personal
plug.
little.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, you guys. That was really wonderful. And so I want to remind everyone that if you want to type a question into the chat, you can go ahead and I'll ask the question, or you can just type in, I have a question, and we can have a robust discussion. So does anyone have any questions?
I have maybe a quick question to start off with. I think
Great.
maybe a lot of people on the call know what NCECA is, but maybe a lot of people don't. So could you just explain a little bit about that, its history and your relationship with it, and how it relates to your project? Thank you. And thanks for your presentation.
No problem. Thank you. I can shoot first. NCECA is the national. Let me get this right. The National Council for Ceramic Education. National Council for. I'm totally messing
The
up.
National Council for the Education
Education
of
of
Ceramic
Ceramic
Arts.
Arts. Thank you.
NCECA.
Yeah. I know. I always switch the C for the council and the ceramic arts together, and I know it. But anyway, it's such an awesome organization. It's been around for approximately 54 years. I'm kind of a little bit fuzzy on that, but it's an amazing organization that brings together ceramic artists, not only around the country, but around the world. They typically bounce around the country. Last year, this year, it was supposed to be in Richmond. The previous year was Minneapolis. Next year, the whole city will be Cincinnati. And what I personally loved about it, I got a chance to attend my sophomore year at Syracuse University in 2016, which was the 50th anniversary. And to me, Mike and I have a set of NCECA rules that we can go down at a later point in life. But rule number one is your first NCECA is always your best NCECA. So definitely take the time to enjoy as many different presentations that they have to offer. They usually in the research room have a huge range of different colleges, universities, but also galleries. There's a cool gallery that a friend here that's in the audience helps to manage called the Art Stream. It's just a really overwhelming but overarching atmosphere full of the ceramic field. And for me, I wasn't even a ceramic major at the time when I went. I just taken my first class with Peter Biesicker, and I fully, wholeheartedly believe that had I not visited NCECA that year, I wouldn't have had an opportunity to go to Haystack later, which really catapulted me into falling in love with the material. It's really cool to be able to be in that atmosphere and connect with different artists around the world, but also just see yourself as an artist yourself. As much as we talk about the high school students love being there, it really feels like that for everybody. It's just like a place where you can really feel at home. The last thing I'll say is I've loved recently an organization called the Color Network has emerged and has been putting on annual meetups during the conference. So it's been great to connect with them and just kind of look forward to it like a family reunion. So, Mike.
Yeah, kind of to bring back the equation, NCECA was my first why in a way, because, I had some sense of the understanding of making process, but, when I went to NCECA and seeing all those artists and seeing all those pots, and there's all these different opportunities, universities that have grad programs, post-bac programs, different, you can shop for different tools, kilns and all these kind of things. It's just a real eye opener, and it's a bunch of fun as long as you have the energy for it.
And I'll just jump in and say that Hartwick sends students to NCECA every year, and we've gone every year for about the last 10 years. And there are a handful of our Hartwick students on this call who have been as well. But if any of this, what they're talking about, is exciting, you can reach out and we'll connect about our clay club and travels to NCECA. But it seems that we have a question from Edith. So Edith, you're up. You should be able to unmute yourself. No, Leah?
Yes, I'm on it.
Yeah, okay. Leah's on it.
Okay, everyone should be allowed to, able to unmute now. Sorry about that.
Great,
That's
thanks.
okay.
Go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Edith. It's such a pleasure to actually see Gerald speak with her clay sibling. So it was wonderful to learn a lot about your practice as well. So I was really curious. I mean, I see the ambition and the dynamic energy between you two as a duo, but I was kind of curious to know, you're talking about the future, and I feel like this is something that you've been working on for such a long time. Do you feel like you would consider perhaps moving towards the status of like a nonprofit organization? Are you thinking of moving into sort of like a brick and mortar space? Or do you just want to consider just floating around doing like the, you know, in sort of community aspect elements to it?
So we're actually in the process of considering something along the lines of an LLC and maybe in the future a nonprofit officially. We're always trying to figure out how do we navigate ourselves outside of NCECA as well, because for the past 3 years we've done it with NCECA. And so how do we introduce another Y into the equation that's somewhat equivalent to NCECA's massive presence? So yeah, we're just slowly kind of taking away and finding ways to operate not only yearly, but several times along the year.
Have you looked at, and this is just curious, have you looked at sort of getting larger funding for the project, even if it is remote, away from NCECA?
Yes, we have like explored a range of different funding options with not only community members donating to us. Like this past year, we've received so much community support with different artists like auctioning off work and sending us funds to like us. Like each year we come up with a budget and we sell shirts that help support the workshops that happen every year. Okay. So we typically are like kind of having like a check and balance of like, okay, what's the idea? What is it going to take financially to meet that? And then asking, community members, friends, donors, things of that such to help meet that goal. But I think Mike and I would love to continue doing this full time. I think we're just trying to balance a lot of the cause of like just working our individual jobs, our individual practices, but the project has been such a huge opportunity to grow personally. I don't think we want to stop unless, one of us individually has reservations.
I really understand the passion too. I think the one statement in your presentation that really got to me was the "will I ever see you again" from that student. And I've heard that in the past before. So that I think in itself is like such a powerful drive. So well, congratulations.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of my favorite lines in addition to that, we were loading up in the car because we were like transporting the students, and it was like the first time we ever brought them to NCECA, and we were like, okay, siblings in the car, and they were like, big siblings or little siblings? And I was like, oh my gosh, you made me cry, man. It made me cry. Yeah. So it really feels like a family atmosphere, really seeing the kids come out of their shells, see that the material is for them, see that the material is forgiving and receptive and exciting. And, Mike and I, in preparation for the project, but also just always reflecting on, in preparation for the presentation, but always reflecting on the project, we think about what will it mean to provide the support that we struggled with in the beginning. And we just always try to tap into that mindset, tap into that experience to be able to constantly imagine, think about like, well, man, if I had some siblings my age, what would I ask them? Or what did I wish they could provide?
Oh, that's
that
nice.
dynamic.
Yeah. Oh, that's so fantastic. I won't keep talking because I'll be here forever.
I think we have a couple questions.
Yeah, we got a couple questions in the chat from some students. So Julie asks if you have a favorite piece to make with clay, like vases or mugs. Do you have a go-to if you don't know what to make? Which I think is kind of a great question. What happens when you don't know what to make?
I guess I can answer that. Right now, my favorite piece is this plate that I'm making. It's a slump mold plate with a molded foot that I end up designing. And it's my favorite piece because it has the most problems right now. And I'm kind of sort of just trying to figure that out. It kind of keeps me entertained and keeps me on my toes. But in terms of go-to, it just depends on what I'm working on at the time. I'm just kind of constantly transitioning into new ideas.
I'm really interested in expanding my visual vocabulary of sculpture. So I love being able to just have fun and just kind of try some new things out in the studio. So that's kind of like my immediate attraction. But recently I got a wheel donated, and Mike knows how much I just love bowls. I mean, you cannot beat the curve of a bowl. And so if I'm feeling frustrated or I'm like waiting for things to set up or just need something to get my hands ready, a bowl is like by far my favorite object. I mean, I could just be hypnotized going back and forth, really emphasizing that curve. I think that, when I did do a lot of vases and stuff, I loved carving. So I think I was side to that more than the mug or the vase combination.
Great. So we have another question from Caitlin Cooney asking if you have favorite foods to eat on the plates that you've made yourselves.
Whew, this is a great question. I was very excited to hear this because food is like
I've been teaching a whole class on food, pottery, and the table this semester, so I've got some students on here who might resonate with your answers.
Mike and I mean, as we mentioned before, we love eating together. One of our favorite shows that was at Ensika was the La Mesa show by Santa Fe Clay. And we just love seeing, the table set up and there's different arrangements by a lot of really, really cool artists. But for me, I have one bowl from that crazy wood fire that we mentioned where Mike and I was stressed out. And it's my favorite for a couple of reasons. One, it's one of the few bowls I actually own that I made because I'm usually giving them away. But we made it during the time we were taking a clay and glaze tech class, and I was infatuated with Blackbird, and I was trying to see how much Blackbird I could put into this high fire body without it melting. And so this is the result of a really cool pot. To also explain, Blackbird is like a very rich, dark, heavy iron clay. It's like it almost appears black or very dark brown. And so one of my favorite things to eat out of it is definitely probably cereal. And a close second is pasta, for sure.
I don't really have a favorite pot of mine that I eat out of. I tend to eat.
That's because I own all the ones.
She's
a
got
lot
a
of Mike pipes.
There'll be times where she'll take a piece and I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever, and then like I'll go visit and I'm like, damn, that's a really sweet piece, and she goes, yeah, I know. But
you gotta see the vision.
My favorite piece to eat out of is I've got this Liz Lurie bowl that I picked up, and that bowl just doesn't stop, and I eat everything out of that bowl. I had chili out of it yesterday, cereal, it just ranges. I just eat everything and anything out of that bowl.
Also, one other, because I know we got some other questions coming in, but in our senior year, Mike and I lived together in apartments. And so that was a really cool opportunity. One, because lots of boundaries that we had to navigate, but also, we had a cabinet full of our pots that we, either we've made or collected over the years. And that was probably a very transforming part, because just before that, I was starting to understand the experience of what it means to like actually live with a homemade object and drink out of it and use it regularly. And so when we lived together, that's all we ate and drank off of. And so there was a really, really cool opportunity to see how different makers make certain considerations that you wouldn't notice had you not been regularly using those objects. We have a kind of a matching set of these Mike Helke plates. And I just love how it fits like the little web of my hand, and just like when you hold it to move around. Probably my all-time favorite meal that we've eaten together is either probably nachos or pizza rolls. But we typically love sharing a good meal on some good plates.
Yeah.
Great. So the next question looks like is from Simon. I can see how Gerald pushes Mike. How does Mike push Gerald?
That's obvious. Like, assumption, Simon. How do you know that I'm pushing Mike?
I think that I'm like the low key daredevil, and when we're in the studio or we're working on things, I kind of like pose these questions that are potentially dangerous or maybe prone to fail, and I just like kind of planting seeds in her head and seeing where she goes with it.
One of my favorite memories of us was senior year. It was the first time I ever really started taking steps, exploring this idea of the send this a strange fruit. And I made this, the first variation of that table. And Mike, I'm always down to hear what Mike says. We started building this relationship and whatnot. And he had this long strip of just like really crazy questions, not only in terms of how to push the materiality, but conceptually what I was like trying to scratch at, really asking some hard things that I still have the strip of paper to this day. It's like in an old sketchbook, but I think Mike, people might misperceive that, I'm very loud and excited and passionate, which Mike is too, but sometimes you might hear that from me first. But Mike is actually I'm probably the conservative one. Mike is the crazy one, but people don't realize that because they assume that dynamic. But I think Mike really does push me out of my comfort zone a lot of times when it comes to the objects I want to make, because we have that very intimate relationship of knowing our past, knowing who we want to be, where we came from, the type of families we have, all those different dynamics. So he can ask me very, very specific things that a lot of people either might not think to ask me or maybe don't have that comfort zone relationship kind
of. Great. All right, so question from Brianna Arnold. Hey, Brianna, one of our alumni. You mentioned enjoying putting textures on your pieces. Do you put textures on objects to be more visual / installation, or to be physically touched?
That's a good question. Oh, Mike, you should talk about the recent ideas where we're putting dry, like using dry stuff, like especially with those new mugs.
Yeah, I've been working with low fire clay, and if anybody knows, low fire sometimes can be difficult finding glazes that fit over your clay body. And so for the larger part of my 2 years that I've been home, I've been putting white slip over these pieces and putting a glaze over it. But of recent, I've kind of been a little, like, I kind of feel weird about it because it comes off as kind of plasticky. And I'm working with this material that's just so rich in texture and in color. And so I thought if I could find a surface that sort of pulls you in and then takes your attention directly to the clay itself, then I would have done my job. And I've been trying to work with finding specific dry slips that kind of, they flux out. And so they're somewhat sealed, but also they're super velvety to the touch and attractive.
They look delicious, man. I think for me, I'm torn between actually the two, because when I'm creating an object, I'm imagining it in an installation as well as in a home or somewhere else. So I really do think that when somebody intimately holds an object, like one of the sculptures, like I want them to spend their time touching and taking close detail into like how everything feels and whatnot. But when I'm in the installation, I'm trying to see how is that surface communicating or reacting or pushing against or creating contrast or just like adding information to the environment itself. And so I'm constantly exploring not only, grog or other additive materials like paper being incorporated into the earthenware that burn out, but also just like it's taken a long time, but different kinds of surfaces. I'm very obsessed with that rich red, especially when I can fire it up a little bit past temp to make it really toasty. But being able to use that visual language and that visual texture, and even when the person gets to hold the object, what does that do to them? I'm trying to find and strike a balance between those two.
Great, thanks. So we've got a comment from Nikki, who says, as maybe the oldest person in the room right now and having worked for over 60 years making art, I just want to comment on the question about what's your go-to, and that I've found that I don't have a go-to when it comes to her. Did I capture that okay, Nikki?
I think that's a good place to sit in. Honestly, our professor Peter, he used to tell us that the two things that people tend to have difficulty changing is their handles and their trimming. And so, if you don't have a go-to, maybe you kind of build up a resistance and tolerance for maybe like falling into a trend that you don't notice. So I definitely think that that's not a bad idea. And if anything, it might be low-key a superpower.
So while working on this presentation, Gerald and I would riff about, very specifics and details about our past and everything. And I talk about how I always feel like I'm maybe the luckiest person on earth, because I've had these people in my life that sort of shifted me and put me on a better trajectory. And she mentioned how, yes, you've been fortunate to have these opportunities, but that was in you the whole time. Like, you were chosen, like you had that in you. And it kind of makes me think about that comment, whereas it's not necessarily about all the pieces around me, but sometimes the piece itself, myself.
Yeah, great. Liz says, honored. Thanks, Mike.
Probably one of our favorite experiences with we have is like driving in like our senior year, renting a car and driving out to Peter and Liz's to fire a kiln. It was probably one of the crazy experiences, one, because just the whole process of getting a car to get out there. But
we were a little bit late.
Yeah, we were, but the kiln, I remember the kiln was actually a little bit, the back needed to catch up with the front. And Mike and I were a part of the shift that helped the kiln catch up. And I mean, firing with different incredible artists like Liz is such a awesome opportunity, because you get to learn so much that you don't really pick up on when you're doing it by yourself, because you're seeing like a master in their element. So I love those kind of opportunities. And even like going to craft schools like Haystack, where I've gotten a chance to see like people like Shannon Goff work, or Paul Briggs. Like it really is something transformative, just seeing them in their element, doing their thing, and picking up on some of those nuances to help you along the way.
So there are a couple of shout outs there from, I think, folks who had to hop off. A thank you from Edith, and I think from your mom.
Yes.
And as well as from Brianna saying thank you. Do you have, I have a question if there's not another question. Yeah. So my question is what does the field of ceramics, of art, need to do in order to do, or I guess adapt to make the Z part of your equation happen, right? I think the ceramics world, in particular, art world as well, is pretty white, is pretty one-dimensional, and I think one of the really powerful pieces of your project is showing students of all different paths what's possible, right? And students who might not have access. So what do we need to do? How can we, as a field of art, a field of ceramics, what do you think needs to happen in order to facilitate, that Z?
I think as Gerald and I have kind of dived deeper into the idea of what is Z, we realize that it's more and more complicated, and it takes a lot of thought and practice to truly implement that in some of these spaces. One of the answers for Z is maybe we leave some clay behind, but of course, at some point that clay gets used up. Or, maybe we, you're gonna show them the poster.
Oh no, you don't have to stop talking. It's diagram.
No, it's all good. And so, yeah, just kind of, I think what I see a lot are sort of quick fixes and things to, reinforce people who are already kind of pretty involved, but in order to truly make change, you kind of have to go back and really shake the ground and change the way that some of these kids see things and some of the teachers see things.
Great.
One of the last visits Mike and I had, we really just honed in on this large piece of paper and just started drawing this intense diagram. And it's very hard to see, but I just wanted to show the diagram in general. But in one section, we really just kind of honed in and started plotting out maybe our trajectories that could have happened had we didn't have different interventions. And I think what's really important about Z is those different moments where people could get stuck, and understanding different demographics of people, not just in terms of race, but socioeconomic status, queer genders, like people have to understand that there's so many other barriers that can prevent a student or an individual from moving forward. And that's where you have to implement Z. And Z doesn't always have to look like money. Sometimes it just looks like being able to have access to a conversation with someone, or being able to travel somewhere to see something different, or going to take an internship somewhere. Or it's just like Z can literally just anything that becomes that intervening moment that challenges and confronts that barrier, because the rest of the world is just kind of encouraging or saying that this barrier is real and that you can't get past this. And so what we try to do with the project is try to be that voice, be that opportunity that challenges that dynamic of what that barrier is. And so I think for the field, we have to ask better questions. Like, we can't just get caught up with like, we provided, so for example, say like an organization offers this scholarship for a student to go there. What if the student can't pay to fly there? Like that immediately impacts them being able to use the scholarship. So it's just like thinking about more questions. It's just like, okay, the student gets there. Who is there to talk to them? Who is there that looks like them? Okay, that opportunity. What if the student wants to continue to work with them? It's just like the train never ends. Like you have to constantly be thinking about, a barrier that comes in front of them, because if not, then you'll just be like, well, we tried, and then not really see the change that you want to reflect in the field.
And so another way that we tried to implement Z was with an Instagram challenge where we asked people, where did you find your Zs? And so we reached out to a bunch of artists and asked them about times where they were going through, something difficult or something that they have to overcome and how they overcame that. And so it ended up being sort of like a library, if you search the hashtag, where people can kind of relate and see how people have overcome these different types of adversaries.
Yeah, we've had a crazy opportunity the last 2 years being able to do these different video challenges, because the students get to see like the first one we did was like, what was your first time in clay? So they see this range of people, somebody who started off in math and then got attracted to the clay bug, or somebody who grew up in this environment where their family, historically was around this material. Like you just see a range of people. And so you understand not only that clay doesn't exist in academia, it's actually a material that is really universal around the world. Like again, not to shout out Peter, but he used to also tell us that, clay, you can find clay anywhere except for kind of like Hawaii, which is like a new landmass. So if that is possible, then that means across the globe, there are people that look different from you, who explore differently, and their culture is reflected in that material that they come in contact with.
Great. We have other questions in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
I just, before maybe people talk, I just want to say hi to a few people. Lucas Easton is a past clay sibling who's here, as well as like Brian and Emily, who part of Objective Clay, who've helped us along the way. Just a lot of great people in this contact. That
David Morrison in the chat too.
Yes.
Great. So I guess maybe a question to bring us to close, unless other questions that come up, but we're in the moment of tremendous change and upheaval, right? Not only living in the midst of a pandemic, our political uncertainty in the future, and Zika is going to be online, right? So how does Clay Siblings meet this moment?
Ooh, good question. We're so after the cancellation of a lot of programming across the country in March, Mike and I took a nice long hiatus because we were working really hard all the way up until cancellation date, trying to secure everything. And we took our time, we relaxed, And we really just thought about the big question, like, what does it mean to have a clay sibling visit? And so we really didn't want the limitations of the world to be like, oh, well, we tried, we can't do a visit, we can't do anything. And I feel like this year, more than ever, we have hit our goal, but also really have gotten the most creative about how to get to that end result.
Yeah.
You go tell it. Go on, brother.
So yeah, after everything got canceled, we kind of were in this weird place where it's like, well, we didn't go to Richmond, so now what? And so we kind of reverted back to our challenge of the idea of like a Z. And so we thought, like, who are we to ask people about roadblocks and how they overcame it? And for us to just kind of like go, we couldn't do it. Like, that's it. So next year, we're planning to hit both Richmond and Cincinnati, and we're planning for the worst as of now. We're thinking that kids are going to be in their homes, attending classes over the computers, and we're coming up with this, Hail Mary tactic-based attempt to try to get clay into these kids' hands.
So we're planning a range of workshops that will be digital, but also will add other, we don't want to reveal too much, but other intimate components that really hit on the idea that clay is not just this meaningless activity that you just like do with your hands. It can be, but we really want to connect the dots that this is a material and this is an object that is made out of that material. So how do we bring those two things together to show the students that, this is like something that is bigger than just like this moment, but there's people all across the country, all across the globe who are accessing it and use this as a stepping point to reaching more opportunities.
And because NCECA is online, we don't feel like we need to be in the week of NCECA. And so we can give ourselves a little bit of leeway and, brainstorm about finding other Ys and other Zs and introduce that into the equation with the workshops.
Yeah, I definitely think in the past, rightfully so, we've really leaned on bringing the students to the conference to really access that point of them thinking about the outside world that they have access to. But this time around, we will lean more heavily on the community that they're in. So like local galleries, community centers, artists that are from that area to really bridge those gaps. And I think this might actually hit our target more efficiently, because like NCECA, though, is made up of people around the country and people from that area, you kind of get lost in the sauce that it's just this moving, blimp that is going from city to city. But if we're this time around, we will be actually talking about, well, these are people who are here permanently. These are the people that you're going to see, more than you're probably going to see in NCECA. So I'm pretty excited about that. And as we mentioned in the slides, that like our community is our biggest asset. So we're going to be leaning on our artists, on our friends, donors, place suppliers, everybody to really help make this happen. And I think that will be such a cool defining moment for these students to be like, these people care that much about me that they brought in all their friends to help make this happen, versus just like these two crazy knuckleheads who wave their magic wand and make stuff happen.
Well, it's great. We've got a couple thank yous out there from Erica and from Simon. There's a question from Simon. Will this be available? Recording be available later? And we have recorded this, and we will, with Gerald and Mike's permission afterward. We can do a little editing if we need to, but we can make it available to the public.
Very cool.
And Brianna says it's kind of like making a sibling map, isn't it?
Oh, that's a great point. Yes, it's really cool to see people with
making what?
Oh, making a sibling map.
MAP.
Yep.
It's so cool to see people with their shirts. These shirts are really important kind of factors that fund the project, but they're also really cool to just notice, either in people taking random selfies or like at large events. So it really doesn't end up being like plotting your family across the globe.
Right. And it's kind of weird because like these are made in my kitchen, and then I see them on somebody's body walking by. It's like, oh my God, that was like at my house and I made that. So it's kind of see that.
It's Great. Well, thank you again. I think this is really wonderful. We've had a really great discussion. We're really appreciated that you would come and share your story with us this semester. So we hope that the next time we see you is in person.
Yes.
And we send you everyone virtual hugs of support out there in the Zoom world. So thank you again. And we do have one more Visiting Artist Lecture Series next week, Christina Huntwood, 6 p.m. Eastern. Look for the Zoom link and the promotion through Instagram and Facebook. So thank you so much for coming, and thanks for being here, you guys.
Thank you for the platform.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.
And feel free to email us or contact us if you have more questions or ideas.